Israel actually existed. Israel actually became a state in 1948. And that was the creation of a state, was the creation of a homeland for one people, was the loss of a homeland for another people. And I want to start creating a healthier narrative about it. And I think we can only do that by conversation. So what do you guys think? Should we go through this PowerPoint right now and then do intros, or should we do intros first and then go into PowerPoint mode? What is the general feel here?
After PowerPoint.
Yeah, I think
after PowerPoint, because I mean I'm already dealing with so that's such a mood, I guess. So I mean, let's get into it then. Let's do this PowerPoint. Why not? I was up till 2 a.m. last night doing it, so I really, really hope you appreciate it. I was like, at the end I might start getting a little loopy. Like you might see the same word written out a few times, and I may not have noticed, but it was like 2:30 a.m. last night, and I was still doing this. Okay, let's start. Oh yeah, maybe my name would be good. My name is Gabriel, right? I'm Director of Students United for Justice in Palestine here on campus. The national organization, I just want to clarify, the national organization is actually called Students for Justice in Palestine, so just like take out that little chunk right there. However, we had a little bit of a confusion when we were creating our group, so we're called Students United for Justice in Palestine. So here we are, united. Kind of cheesy, I know. But you can add us on Facebook. It's Students United for Justice in Palestine at FSU. And we basically are present on every major college campus in the country. A lot of people don't like us. A lot of people do like us. But that's kind of an inherent part of this issue, right? People are very personally connected. Before I run into this, I do want to, just let me know a little bit of my background. My dad is Jewish. He's not a practicing Jew, but ethnically, my dad is Jewish. His mother was born in Romania in 1939, I believe, like 38, and she, one of the late 30s. That's where my grandma was born. She was born in Romania, and Romania in that time period, it was not a good place to be if you were Jewish, because as we all know, there was the Nazi Holocaust going on. So my grandmother fled Romania, and she went to Israel. And she joined the Israeli Defense Forces, as you have to do as an Israeli citizen. However, she joined voluntarily. And I found out this summer when I went to Brazil, and she lives in Brazil now, I spoke to her, and she told me that she actually fought in the Sinai War in 54, 56. Well, it's in the PowerPoint, I don't remember. It's either 54 or 56. But she fought in there, and she's a trained sniper. So I'm like, Grandma, you're a trained sniper in the IDF. That's really cool. I'm very pro-Palestinian. I mean, it's such an interesting dimension, right? But we had good conversation, and she's not the only person who's very, considers themselves very pro-Israeli, who I might agree with on a lot of things, who I've had good conversations with. I personally have met with a lot of the people who are directors of Knowles for Israel, which is the pro-Israel group on campus, and they're rational people. I just think they're wrong. And that's okay. Everyone can think you're wrong or right, and that's just, up to you. And we're just going to delve into what's verifiable, what's an objective historical fact. So I'm not going to be talking about rhetoric here. I'm not going to be like, just like pouring coal into the fire. I just want us to go over rationally what we can verify, what's well documented. And then you can come up to your own conclusions. Simple as that. And then we'll talk about your conclusions. Yeah? So this is the PowerPoint slide I call the basics. It's a condensed version of about 90 slides that I have. So here we go. I want to show you 5,000 years of history in about 90 seconds, right? And then I have a very important question to pose, right? So this is the imperial history of the Middle East in 90 seconds, the last 5,000 years. And towards the end, I'll point out when it comes, this is where it gets very, very important. But I want you to ask yourself, as you're watching this, are Jews and Muslims prone to fighting? Is it a natural phenomenon, something that's been going on for thousands of years? Or is it something that's more recent? Let's just take a quick look at the history in the last 5,000 years in the Middle East. Ooh. It moves kind of quickly here, so. Oh yeah, Kingdom of Egypt. Stuff is good. Biggest thing. And here's what we're paying attention to, right? There's Israel. Oh, right. That's the ancient kingdom of Israel. This is very important. We're going to come back to this concept a little bit later in the PowerPoint that I have presented, right? And then the Babylonians expel the Jews from the Holy Land, right? This is the first diaspora. And the Persians come, they actually rebuild the Temple of David and Solomon. The Roman Empire, oh, the Romans, those bastards. Another diaspora, the Jews are expelled from the Holy Land, the Byzantine Empire comes. And then, I don't know about that. I've never heard of them, honestly. I gotta be honest. The Caliphate. This is the rise of the Islamic Empire, right? This is the golden era for Islam. The Crusaders come from Egypt and they just kill millions of people, as the Crusaders and Europeans tend to do. They're not kidding. All right, this is where stuff gets really important. This is how huge the Ottoman Empire was at its height. The Ottoman Empire falls to European colonialism by the end of World War I. The British have a mandate over Palestine. They carve out nation states and basically give it to their friends like they always have done. And then this is in 1948 when Israel was established, right? But the map is going to change very drastically. There was a war in 1948. It changes to that very, very quickly, with the West Bank being owned by Jordan and the Gaza Strip being owned by Egypt. But I want you, yeah, they're all, they claim their independence from the Europeans, woohoo. Anti-colonial struggle, yeah. But I just wanted to point out that we only really saw an acceleration in the violence in between the Muslims and Jews of Palestine, of historic Palestine, right about this point right here. So we have about almost 5,000 years of coexistence of Jewish communities which have been in Palestine for thousands of years alongside Muslim Arabs. So I just want to pick apart the argument that Jews and Muslims are inherently supposed to be interlocked in some holy war and we just can't do anything about it. Let's throw our hands up. We live in America. Let's forget about it. One quick fact. The United States is the single largest provider of aid to Israel in the world. We provide between $3.5 and $4 billion every single year to Israel. And I mean, let's keep in mind, Israel is a first world country. We're talking about a very well-developed economy here. So we do play an integral role. Whatever position you have, whether you're pro-Palestinian or pro-Israeli, whatever you want to consider yourself, or neither, we do play a role. Every time you buy something, every time you pay taxes at all, a little portion of that is going to the ongoing conflict. So, I mean, let's also keep in mind we're still playing for the war in Vietnam. So, little hunks of your money are going in little different places. You might not even be aware of it. So, moving on, I hope you guys really enjoyed that. I'll post that on our wall. I think someone asked, or Whitney asked me to months ago, and I haven't done that yet. I'm sorry. So, moving on. This is where I pointed out that, when I pointed to the greater Israel, this is a very important idea, especially to Jews who are more religious. A lot of people who are more religious, who also tend to be more on the right on the political spectrum, they kind of envision the creation of the larger Israel again, which is problematic because, first of all, not everyone can agree as to where exactly the larger, the greater Israel was. So it's kind of difficult, and it plays very much into the political situation as it is. For example, when Israel was occupying the Sinai Peninsula from Egypt, a lot of the hardliners in the Israeli Knesset were actually arguing that they can let go of the Sinai because it wasn't part of the historic Jewish homeland, which was the ancient kingdom of Israel, right? So it's very relevant. It's an old idea, but it's very close and very dear to a lot of people, right? Hey, Mons, what's up? He's our treasurer, Mons. All right, and also we have to realize that it's not just they're fighting over this land because they want some piece of land to live on. If it were down to that, this would be a much more simple situation. We have to realize that the third holiest site for Islam, the Al-Aqsa Mosque, is in Jerusalem. And to complicate things a little bit further, it's claimed, a lot of people claim that the Al-Aqsa Mosque was built in part on top of the ancient temple of David and Solomon, which is the first holiest site for Judaism. So, what are we going to do, right? This is quite a quite a little mess, quite a pickle we've got here, right? This is actually a recreation of the Temple of David and Solomon. It was destroyed by the Babylonians and then destroyed by the Romans. So it actually doesn't. This is like a little model of it. The remaining portion is what we know as the Western Wall. It's the Wailing Wall, where a lot of people go to pray. They put their little their prayers into the wall, and that's believed to be the last remaining portion of the Temple of David and Solomon. I do want to point out that this is very important. In the United States currently, we have a lot of right-wing evangelical movements going on right now. And a lot of these people believe from a religious perspective that Jesus is only going to come back to earth and the coming of Christ is only going to happen once we destroy the Al-Aqsa Mosque, rebuild the Temple of David and Solomon. In my opinion, that is equal to World War III. So if they want to bring the end of the world, they're doing the right thing, right? The only problem is that it sounds outlandish and crazy to us, but these people have a lot of political influence. I mentioned the diaspora, right? Every time, like when the Babylonians came, when the Assyrians came, when the Romans came, they basically diasporaed all the Jews who lived there. This is actually a map of the diaspora. There was a kind of a split in between the Jewish community. Jews who went to Europe and north, they became known as the Ashkenazi Jews. Oh my gosh. Yeah, Jews who went to the north in Europe became known as the Ashkenazi Jews. Jews who stayed throughout the Middle East and Africa became the Sephardic Jews. This becomes, there's some big cultural differences in between these two groups, and it plays out very much in Israeli politics, right? So this is actually a little photograph right now of the depiction of when the Romans came and they sieged Jerusalem. Romeo Flavius, who was a Jewish historian, said about 1.1 million people were killed when the Romans seized Jerusalem. Just to put things into perspective. Like I said, then came Islam. This is the height of the Islamic Empire. And this is where we see a large influx of Arab Muslims into historic Palestine. But let's keep in mind, Arabs as well as Jews have been living there for thousands of years, even before the height of the Islamic Empire, right? The Crusades came. I mean, the Crusades, wow, this changed world history forever, right? The Crusades, after about 5 centuries of peaceful coexistence, the Crusades came and pretty much slaughtered everyone and said Jews are no longer allowed to live in Jerusalem, which is very problematic because Jerusalem is the holiest site in Judaism. So it's kind of troublesome, right, to say the least. They only held the city for 88 years though, right? So that's basically nothing. And it fell again to the Muslims in 1887 under the sultanship of this guy. I'm not going to say his name. He's a cool beard. This is the height of the Ottoman Empire, and this is extremely important because this is where it starts forming, more direct relevance to what happened today. The Ottoman Empire lasted from 1517 to 1917. What happened in 1917? Does anyone know what happened in 1917?
World War I?
Yeah, World War I, right? It was the end of World War I. It was also the Russian Revolution, but that's on the other side. What happened at the end of World War I was that the Ottoman Empire had aligned itself with the Germans, and the Germans had lost the war. So basically it's the dissolution of the Ottoman Empire. They cut it into chunks, they gave it to the French, they gave it to European powers. And it just so happened to be that the ancient, what used to be ancient Israel, or a portion of ancient Israel, historic Palestine, was given to the British, and what became known as the British Mandate. However, the Arabs were not very happy about this. This was the rise of Arab nationalism. They wanted their own Arab state so they could have, they could be their own self-sufficient country, right? So this is actually the flag of the Arab Revolt of 1816 through 1818. If you notice, 1817 is right between 1816 and 1818. This is the fall of the Ottoman Empire, right? So basically, according to the Makan Hussein correspondence, the British came to the Ottomans, to the Arabs living in the Ottoman Empire and say, listen, we got a little deal here. We got all these weapons, we got all this, all these resources that we want to give you. All you have to do is rise up against the Ottoman Empire, right? All you have to do is destroy the Ottoman Empire, and then we'll give you your Arab state. How about it? And of course the Arabs said yes, so they had a revolt from 1916 to 1918, and the fall of the Ottoman Empire was actually largely attributed to the Arab revolt. Then we have this clash of ideologies going on. This is Zionism is starting to come into full swing. Zionism being the sense of Jewish nationalism, that we need a Jewish state for Jewish self-determination. It was basically the father of modern-day Zionism is Theodor Herzl. The first Zionist Congress was held in 1897. This is the first Arab Congress, which is also known as the Palestine Congress in 1913. We start seeing this really, really kind of dangerous dynamic coming out in the Palestinian territories. This is actually a map of the British Mandate. This is what the Brits were given after the fall of the Ottoman Empire. And it's important to realize, this is very important historically, that in 1922, the British actually cut Palestine from Transjordan. Transjordan is now known as Jordan, and the family that the British gave it to, the Hashemites, actually still own Jordan. So Jordan is officially called the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. This is also very, very important because at the same time, the British declared, there was this thing called the Balfour Declaration, which basically lent British support for the creation of a Jewish homeland in Palestine. This is actually a quote directly from the Balfour Declaration, and as you can see, look how carefully it's worded, the establishment in Palestine of a national homeland for the Jewish people. You can interpret that to say, oh, we're going to have a Jewish state, which used to be Palestine, but it's now a Jewish state, or we're going to have a place where Jews can safely live inside of Palestine and leave Palestine as it is. That kind of comes down to interpretation. But the British, I think, were being sly because they were not idiots, they were evil. Simple as that. They had their own imperial aspirations at hand. And as a result, we start seeing increased Jewish migration to Palestine. This is actually, if you want to look right here, these are the amounts of Jews that were moving into Palestine from 1920 to 1945, with a grand total of 867,000 Jews moved into historic Palestine, compared to Christians and Muslims. We had 88,000 Christians and Muslims moving into Palestine in the same period. So I want you to consider what's going to happen after the fall of the Ottoman Empire. What's going to happen to the economy there? What's going to happen to the culture there, right? And in my opinion, actually, what am I saying? It's quite well documented that the economy basically collapsed. And you have 800,000 Jewish people who are culturally different, who have different relationship to land, who have a different relationship to the idea of ownership, moving into this land, and it created some very intense tensions between the different communities that were already there. So in 1936, the food spike, the price of food for Palestinians went up tremendously because of the higher demand for land due to Jewish migration mostly. Basically, the rent shot up for each decker of land. They use deckers, right? So people who are already very impoverished because of the fall of the Ottoman Empire are suddenly being drawn, economically pushed away from their land, and they find themselves being more impoverished every single day. I found this really interesting that according to this dude, Mahmoud Yasfak, from the University of Haifa, which is in Israel, he wrote this book talking about the economic reasons why there was this revolt that happened, I believe, in 1936. Just to give you an idea, in 1931, about 106,000 dunams of land, which is a certain amount of land, was feeding about 590,000 Arabs, compared to 102,000 dunams of land feeding 50,000 Jews. Right? So we can start seeing these economic reasons for the war, right? So let's move on. I'm maybe taking a little bit too long here. This is what the Peel Commission is. After the revolt, after the revolt, the British came together and said, wait, why is this huge revolt? Let's do this thing called the Peel Commission. The Peel Commission came up with this idea that we should fragment the land, give this portion up here to the Jews, give this portion right here to the Arabs, and Jerusalem will be administered by a UN body pretty much. Well, it wasn't the UN then, because, was it the UN? No, it wasn't actually called UN, it was the Demolition, whatever. According to the plan, the Peel Commission, about 225,000 Palestinians would have to be transferred, and about 1,250 Jews would have to be transferred. Later on, there's another commission called the Woodhead Commission, which actually found this plan to be impossible. It basically claimed that the Palestinian territory would have been economically infeasible, while it wasn't Israel, the Jewish territory would have been, they would have been able to create an economy there. So this plan was not sufficient for basically life to sustain itself. And then, as we see, there's a civil war. By 1947, there's a civil war, a full-fledged civil war in between the Jewish communities and the Arab communities in historic Palestine. So the United Nations basically runs and they try to create a functioning two-state solution. This is very important because when you talk to people, one of the prominent things I hear is, but the Arabs rejected the plan. Right? Very true. The Arabs did reject the plan. But let's look a little bit deeper into that. Nothing is quite as simple as it seems like in this conflict right now. This is what the proposed UN Resolution 18 looked like. It actually passed. So the population at this time of historic Palestine was 67% mostly Arab Muslims, non-Jews, and 33% Jewish. The Jewish state was given 56% of the land. The Arab state was given 43% of the land. So we're giving a minority the majority of the land, and we're giving a majority the minority of the land, right? This plan was accepted by international Zionist organizations. However, when we look at the facts on the ground, the facts are that the paramilitary Zionist groups, which were on the ground already, groups like the Lehi, Stern Gang, and Irgun, had already rejected this plan. In fact, Meshin Benin, the leader of the Irgun, who later became the 6th Prime Minister of Israel, said the bisection of our homeland is illegal, it will never be recognized. This is a very common idea amongst the more religious, amongst the people who are more far on the right. They tend to see any sort of Palestinian or non-Jewish sovereignty in the ancient homeland as kind of as treasonous, right? Which is problematic because, hey, I don't even need to tell you, you guys got it. So there's this thing called the Nakba. Nakba literally translates into catastrophe. Palestinians commemorate the creation of Israel as Nakba. And commemorating Nakba inside of Israel is actually illegal. What the Nakba refers to is the diaspora of Palestinians from their homeland. By 1948, about 700,000 Palestinians had been expelled from Palestine. More specifically, there's this Plan Dalet, which was carried out by the Haganah, which is one of the paramilitary groups, which later became absorbed by the Israeli Defense Forces, the IDF, which still exists today. And basically, according to Benny Morris, who's a very famous Israeli historian, about 250 to 300,000 Palestinians were expelled in 8 weeks systematically. This is an act of ethnic cleansing. We have to keep in mind ethnic cleansing does not necessarily mean that you were just slaughtering people, although people were being slaughtered. Ethnic cleansing can also mean you are forcing someone from their land by economic means or by military might, right? Yeah, basically Ian Pape, he was also a famous Israeli historian, he wrote this very prominent book called The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine, and he lays out the blueprint that groups like the Haganah were taking to expel as many Palestinians from the future Israeli state that they were envisioning. This is what it looked like in 1948, right? Following the Civil War in 1947, Israel was invaded by Egypt, Transjordan, Iraq, and Syria, and volunteer troops from Lebanon, Saudi Arabia, Yemen, and Pakistan. Whew. So it looks very much like this newly created state is about to be destroyed. This is a turning point in Israeli history. Israel won this war, and it was a smashing military victory, and it created this sense of almost Israel could not be defeated. It really did create a very strong, it solidified the sense of Jewish nationalism in the newly created state. After this war, about 700,000, actually 726,000 Palestinians had been expelled during the war, and the West Bank right here was actually controlled by Jordan. It was annexed by Jordan, and the Gaza Strip right here was actually annexed by Egypt. This is also the rise. After this, we start seeing the rise of the Fedayeen movement. I know. We see the rise of the Fedayeen movement, which are Palestinian rebels, pretty much. They're armed groups. They carried out attacks regularly into Israel from Jordan, from the West Bank, and from Gaza and Egypt. This really created a rising sense of tension in between Israel and its neighbors. I mean, you're in a rough neighborhood. I mean, I've heard that a few times. So basically, this is the war that my grandma fought. This was the Sinai War when basically Nasser right here, doesn't he kind of look like wax? He's such a man. Look at that. I don't know what I'm saying. He's kind of like the figurehead of Pan-Arabism, and Pan-Arabism basically says we need a united Arab country, and only with a united Arab country will we be able to beat the colonizers, which is true. The Arab world was basically colonized by Europeans for a very long time. He was the figurehead for this, and actually Egypt and Syria for a time were actually joined and kind of considered the same country. It was kind of a Pan-Arabist experiment. He nationalized the Strait of Titran and basically blocked it off to any sort of Israeli shipping, which is very problematic because this is basically Israel's only way in and out of this entire portion of the world. So Israel's not very happy about that, so they invaded the Sinai Peninsula, basically totally overwhelmed Nasser's troops, and they took it back and opened the straits, of course, themselves. This is also the rise of the Fatah movement and the PLO. Fatah literally means the opening or the victory. And the PLO stands for the Palestinian Liberation Organization. Palestinian Liberation Organization, founded in 1964. That stunning young man right there is Yasser Arafat. He just looks, look at his glasses, I must glasses like that. The problem with the PLO right here is that it has no central decision-making organism, right? So there are tons of different factions. Some factions use violence, some factions don't. Some factions are communist, some factions are liberal, but they all kind of are represented, or they all kind of coalesce as the PLO. The PLO today still is the only organization which represents all Palestinians in diaspora. So currently, today, it's about 4.5 million Palestinians live in diaspora, making them the largest refugee population in the world. This is the 1967 war. Nazca translates into setback. So the Nakba was catastrophe, and Nazca means setback. Egypt and Syria joined, like I said, they had like a temporary joining. Nasser, who was the president of Egypt, had received news from the USSR, who was aligned with Egypt and Syria, that Israel was basically amassing troops near Syria, which prompted them again to invade the Sinai Peninsula. And the first thing he does is come to the Straits of Titran and say, no more Israeli shipping for you. Which Israel considers an act of war. Israel launches Operation Focus, which basically destroys most of the Air Force. There's about 100,000 Israeli troops versus 240,000 Arab troops. Very scary time to be in Israel. And very interesting development happened here. During this war, Israel recaptured the West Bank from Jordan and also annexed Gaza from Egypt. Right? What's important about this is that the West Bank, until this point, had basically been run by the Jordanian government, King Hussein, who was not allowing, for example, any Jews to go in or out of the West Bank, which is troubling because there are Jewish holy sites within the West Bank. So for the first time, this is actually the most famous photograph of it. This is when IDF troops were taking back Jerusalem, and this is behind them is the Wailing Wall, the West Wall. It's the last remnants of the Temple of David and Solomon. Until this point, from 1948 until this point, Jews were not allowed to walk by that wall. So that's a very triumphant moment in Israeli history. Black September. This is basically a huge influx of PLO troops went into Jordan. They used it as a training camp to launch attacks into Israel. Israel would launch attacks back, massacres on both sides, that whole story again. And it killed about 20,000 Palestinians in the September of 1970. King Hussein of Jordan kind of became known for that. And later, I don't know if any of you guys remember or if you've ever seen that movie, Munich. Munich was the story of Black September, which later became a militant group, and how they had a massacre of Israeli athletes in the Olympics. It's a great movie, very good movie. And then again, the Yom Kippur War. The Yom Kippur War was, Yom Kippur is the holiest day in Jewish tradition, and it was a surprise attack by Egypt and Syria to reclaim the land which had been occupied during the 1967 war. So basically, Egypt trying to retake the Gaza and the Sinai, and Jordan was trying to retake the West Bank. Also, Syria was trying to retake the Golan Heights. The Golan Heights today are still occupied territory, as is the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. Well, we'll talk about the Gaza Strip a little bit more further. 1973 continued. 1973 was a real big turning point because it kind of shook Israeli confidence in its military capacity, military might. It also prompted the OPEC oil embargo of the 1970s. Your parents probably tell you about it, how people were lining up at the gas stations because there was no more gas. It was basically all the Arab countries saying, oh yeah, the United States, you're going to support Israel? We're going to cut off your oil. So needless to say, it did affect things on a global perspective. Yeah. And this war actually prompted a very, very important historical significance. We came to the Camp David Accords of 1978 after the Yom Kippur War. This is the first time Israel actually makes a peace deal with any of its neighbors. Egypt and Israel sign a peace accord. Egypt recognizes Israel's right to exist, and and Israel gives back the Sinai Peninsula to Egypt. And this is a very big turning point. Yeah, I don't even need to say anymore. Look at them. But I do want to mention that this Camp David Accords had very little to do with the refugee problem, had very little to do with the ongoing, basically the Palestine issue as a whole. Then we come to the 1982 Lebanon War. Basically, this group, Hezbollah, sorry about that. All right. You have to go to 9 o'clock. Just kidding. There was a series of conflicts in between Israel and Lebanon. Southern Lebanon had become highly saturated with, by this point, PLO fighters who were expelled from Jordan. They moved to Lebanon as their new base of operation. And in 1982, it was the expulsion of the PLO from Lebanon. They went to Tunisia. They relocated in Tunisia. What's important about the Lebanon War is that I don't know if anyone came to the Hedy Epstein speaker. We had a speaker, her name was Hedy Epstein. She started off her speech by talking about this thing called Sabra and Shatila. Sabra and Shatila are Palestinian refugee camps in the southern portion of Lebanon. And during the 1982 Lebanon War, the Sabra and Shatila camps were surrounded by IDF troops who were basically holding guard while Christian militias slaughtered about 3,500 Palestinians, men, women, children, fighters, and non-fighters alike. Just one more point. There was a court hearing. The Israeli Commission found that Israel had an indirect responsibility. However, also found that Ariel Sharon, who until recently was the Prime Minister of Israel, had a personal responsibility for the massacre. Up till now, no one has been held accountable for the massacre of Sabra and Shatila. And this is also where we see the rise of the Hezbollah, which we hear of still a lot today. What's up, Grant?
What did you think of Balfour Declaration's take on?
I've never actually watched that movie, but that is something that we would like to, or might be interested in showing.
Cool, yeah, it's pretty good. I mean, CJ and I watched it when it came out, and he liked it a lot. So.
Yeah, CJ actually recommended that.
That
movie.
It was really good.
Yeah, I really want to watch it. It looks really cool, like animated. I like that a lot. All right, then we come to the first. I'm wrapping it up. I promise. We come to the first Intifada. Intifada means uprising, right? So the first Intifada, it starts in 1978, in the late 80s, and it starts with protests, general strikes. However, when the protests and strikes don't basically bring any progress, it starts leading to armed confrontations, bombings, that whole thing. There's about 160 Israelis died, and about 2,100 Palestinians died. We're going to start seeing a very, very continuing trend of lots and lots of Palestinian casualties compared to fewer Israeli casualties. There's no way to compare suffering like that. We just have to take it in a historical context. And this is also where we see the rise of Islamist factions like Islamic Jihad and Hamas, which is an offshoot of the Islamic Brotherhood, which basically has now won elections in Egypt. However, I do want to caution people that Islamic Brotherhood here and Islamic Brotherhood there can be two very different things. I don't know if you've been listening, but last year, we hear a lot about this Palestinian statehood issue. And it's not something that's been recent. Palestinian statehood, in 1988, the Palestinian National Council, which is more commonly called the PNC, it declared an independent Palestinian state in Gaza, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem. And it also accepted UN Resolution 242, which ended the 1967 war, I believe. UN Resolution 242 explicitly recognizes Israel's right to exist. This is a very important point, because one of the major points we hear when talking to people is, but how can we negotiate with Palestinians? They don't recognize our right to exist. I would recommend being, really, what about the Palestinian Declaration of Statehood of 1988? How about that? Or what about the Palestinian PA going to the UN last year, basically begging them to recognize a two-state solution, and getting rejected, vetoed by the United States? Needless to say, the United States did not support the move, so it didn't move forward. The peace process, we hear this a lot. It started with the Madrid Conference, the Oslo Accords of 1993, where Israel recognized PLO as the sole representative of Palestinian people, and also where the letters of mutual recognition were written, where the PLO basically wrote a letter to Israel. We recognize your right to exist. And, you know, the opposite happened that way. So also, if someone says, but they don't recognize our right to exist, what about the Oslo Accords of 1993 and the letters of mutual recognition? But also, what's important about the Oslo Accords is that it split the West Bank into I think it's actually 3 administrative areas. I don't know why it says 4. And this is what the West Bank looks like today. If you can see right here, Area A is all the yellow. Area A means that it's full Palestinian security and administrative control. But don't let that fool you. That does not mean that the IDF cannot have regular operations in Area A. So they basically say, all right, Palestinians, you have control here, 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 here. But keep in mind, if you're a Palestinian living in Hebron and you want to get to, like, I don't know, you want to get to Jenin, there's a problem, because, you know, this is not where Palestinians can go. Palestinians cannot simply get in their car and drive down the road and go to Jenin, because there are roads that are made only for Israeli settlers and there are roads that are made for Palestinians. And it just so happens to be that the roads that are made for Palestinians are basically dirt ditches. Right? Also, Area B, where you see kind of like the shaded, I don't know what color, like tan color. It's supposed to be joint Palestinian civil control and joint military control. Basically meaning the IDF runs it. And Area C, where we see more of like this white, which is the vast majority of what we see, is full Israeli administrative and military control. So you're a Palestinian living in, in this area right here. You can't really go this way because there's a wall. You can't go this way because there's a settlement, and you can't get the road here because that road's only for Israelis. Kind of tends to make life very difficult. I just want us to analyze this, to really recognize how would we live if we lived under certain situations. Imagine, just imagine, if from here up to Tennessee Street, you could feel free to move and everything. However, if you go down south a little bit and you hit Pensacola, no, you can't. You're the wrong kind of person. You can't go down Pensacola, sorry. Just live your life from here to Tennessee. You'll be fine. And again, Jerusalem, East Jerusalem. I'm going to leave East Jerusalem to Aaron because I'm sure Aaron is much more certified to talk about that than I am. The Second Intifada comes. This is in between 2000 and 2008. I just wanted to show you the amount of civilian casualties. This sort of deal, it becomes very, very, very common, right? I'm almost done. And then again, the separation barrier. This is the wall that Israel is building in the West Bank. It's this red line right here. And as you can tell, it's not a straight line, nor does it follow the green line. The green line is the armistice line, where you're supposed to be in Palestinian territory. So the wall will be about 450 miles long. It's currently about halfway done. And it will surround or isolate about 12% of the West Bank. According to B'Tselem, about 497,000 Palestinians will be isolated or completely surrounded by this wall. For example, if I live in this city right here and I'm a Palestinian, I cannot go anywhere unless an IDF troop feels like letting me through for the day. So if my farmland happens to be on the other side of the wall, too bad. Just very much like the city Budrus, which we watched a documentary on. Budrus was actually able to mobilize enough popular resistance and nonviolent protests to make the wall move. So 40% of the city was not even up. And this is what we also hear a lot about, the Gaza disengagement. Until this point, Israel not only had settlements going on in the West Bank settlers are around 300,000 to 400,000 today. Israel also had settlements inside this tiny little strip called the Gaza Strip, which is about half the size of Leon County, and also happens to be one of the most densely populated pieces of land in the world. I read a BBC report recently saying that by 2020, the Gaza Strip will be unlivable. They have no more drinkable water. About 1,170 settler families were moved, and they were relocated at a whopping cost of $900 million. Needless to say. So a lot of people say that we did give Gaza their freedom, and then they just lob rockets at us, which is true. Gaza, a lot of rockets are lobbed into Israel, which are war crimes. And any reputable human rights organization recognizes those rockets as war crimes. I totally agree. However, Israel does still maintain total control over Gaza's coast and any border, as well as its airspace. So you can tell me whether that's the end of the occupation. Hamas won 2006 elections. They won about 44% of the popular vote. There was basically a civil war between Hamas and Fatah in 2006, which was financed by the United States. And this is the 2006 Lebanon War. This is when I started getting turned on to the conflict. Just basically, Amnesty International released a report claiming that there were war crimes committed in Lebanon, that basically the indiscriminate bombing of Lebanon was enough to be considered war crimes. The international airport in Beirut was destroyed. It was very, very tough for living in Lebanon at this time. About 1,191 Lebanese civilians were killed, 44 Israelis were killed. And this is where I really started getting into this issue, Operation Cast Lead. From December 2008 till January 2009, while Americans were kind of distracted with this little election we had going on, there was a 23-day siege on Gaza, and basically about 1,147 Palestinians were killed, 13 Israelis were killed. But what really caught my attention was what you see right here. Because this didn't look like any other bomb I had seen before. This looks like, to me, like lava falling from the sky. And as I started reading into it, I started reading reports about how Israel was dropping white phosphorus onto the most heavily populated piece of land in the world. White phosphorus is not a precision weapon. White phosphorus has a very wide range, and actually according to the Geneva Convention, the Fourth Geneva Convention, it cannot be used as a weapon. It can only be used as an illumination. This is actually a United Nations school in the Gaza Strip, which was destroyed by Israel. 44 children inside were hiding from a bombing, and they died. And just to let you know, it'll stick to your skin and burn at 1,500 degrees until it has no more oxygen to burn. And this is where we end our little discussion today. This is what the West Bank looks like. Everywhere you see a little mountain is an Israeli settlement. Meaning that if you're a Palestinian, you're not allowed in there. You're not allowed around it. And if they decide that they want to build a wall to protect that settlement, you've lost that land. You have no claim to it. There's nothing you can do. Right? So I want to ask you, with 300,000 to 500,000 settlers living in the West Bank, what are we to do? How do we move forward? There's a dual system of law, meaning that if I'm an Israeli settler living in the settlement right here, and you're a Palestinian living right here, we have two different sets of laws. There's a military law, which applies to you as a Palestinian, and there's a civilian law, which applies to me as an Israeli settler. Meaning, I have due process in court, meaning I have the right to things like movement, I have the right to expression, but as a Palestinian living under military law, you don't. And this is what we mean when we talk about the occupation. The occupation is not an abstract term, it is on the ground. It is real, it is verifiable. 2.5 million Palestinians live in the West Bank under these conditions. And this is where I'm done. Are we going to, all right, well it's 7:50 right now. Sorry, Aaron. Just twice as long as I thought it would be. Do you guys want to do some quick intros? I feel like there are so many faces here. Quick intros, or do you want to go first, Aaron, and then we'll go into discussion later?
Can we let him go first, because the video will run out?
And then we can do question and intro. What's that? Woohoo! My throat hurts.
That's all right. Just to briefly introduce myself and what I'm going to talk about. My name's Aaron. I'm in the religion department here. I'm Jewish. And I've been to the Holy Land, as it's called by some. And what I'm about to show you are some of the on-the-ground real things that I experienced there, as well as some maps. Some of it will be a bit of a recap, but we can obviously breeze through that since we had such a dense and compact and informative presentation. Yeah, so Gabe said at the beginning of his presentation that he was going to give like objective history. And a lot of the things that I'm going to show are objective also. They happened, they are real people, they are real statistics, there are real situations on the ground. It's also a partial representation. I am not going to give you any personal Israeli narratives. I'm not going to give you the Jewish perspective on why Israelis feel. I'm not going to go into Israeli psychology, and I'm not going to do that because it's really important for me as somebody who sees himself, I see myself as a liberationist, to talk on behalf and from the perspective of those who are oppressed. Okay? Jews in Israel are not oppressed. They do not live under daily conditions of oppression. Palestinians do. And it is Israelis, Jews in the land, but also abroad who enable that oppression. And so it is my obligation as a Jew to speak for them, for the Palestinians who are oppressed by Jews. I really wish we could get this.
Is that your PowerPoint right there?
It's the PowerPoint, yeah.
Not worried.
Not really.
Oh God. Oh, built-in help. Oh God. There's so horrible.
Open office?
No, open office is great. But like Windows built-in help API is just like, just like picture a car that's just so broken you're afraid to drive it.
Okay. Ready or not? Okay, so I guess I'll just say real quick that I went to be a part of a group called the Israeli Committee Against House Demolitions. It's an Israeli group started by an American Jew who made Aliyah in the 70s, early 70s. His name is Jeff Halper. He served his stint in the IDF and basically saw what was happening to Palestinians, saw that it was wrong, and so started an organization to help resist something called home demolitions, which is a common practice in Palestine, exercised by the IDF and by various civil administrations in the Israeli government. We'll get into that later. That's an olive tree. Okay, so when I first got there, I went to a place called the Hope Flowers School. That gentleman with the white button down on is named Ibrahim Issa. His father started this school as a kindergarten in the 80s, and it gradually grew into, I think now it's through middle school and starting to become for high school age kids. And what it is it's a school that specifically focuses on nonviolent ways to deal with trauma and violence that one's experienced in one's own life. So it's a really unique school. A lot of international people go there to see what they do and to learn from it and to be inspired by it, and I was inspired by it. And while I was there, this was when I basically first got to the land, Ibrahim Issa showed me a couple things from the top of the school, from the roof. Okay, if you can see on the far left corner, oh, I'm sorry, we'll start here. This is settlement. This is settlement outgrowth. What happens is a number of Israelis come to a particular place in the West Bank, which Bethlehem is in the West Bank. They come to a particular place that doesn't have anything on it, or sometimes it does, and they settle there. And what then has to happen is that the IDF, which stands for the Israeli Defense Forces, right, the Israeli military, has to go and defend the settlers because they're Israelis, right? So first you have settlers come, and then you have Israeli soldiers, the IDF, come to make sure that they're protected. There's the settlement block, the settlement outgrowth I just showed you. Okay, here we have a valley, and it's a little pixelated maybe I don't know how you can see it, but there's an Israeli settlement on the top of the hill over here. So what happens, and the way that settlements expand in Israel, is that you have outgrowth come across a valley into the top of a hill, you have the military come out and protect them, and then you basically fill in the space in between. It's just how settlements expand. To shift further, you see how we're moving to the right here? We're just going to pan right, and this road is going to keep going. Okay, this road comes down, like the settlement's out there. Okay, while I was here, Ibrahim told me that these homes had home demolition orders placed upon them. And I had no idea what the hell that meant. And he told me it was basically notice from whatever governing municipality administers a particular area, Israeli governing municipality, which says that your house could be demolished. When somebody's given a notice, it often doesn't come with a time or a date on it. It just says this structure is not acceptable to us, and so it can and perhaps will be demolished in the future sometime. Of course, the family has certain legal avenues of recourse that they can try to pursue, but as we'll see later, those basically never work. Not all homes that are given orders are demolished, but these ended up being demolished. And they were demolished because the wall that Gabe showed us a picture of, we'll see some more pictures of, is now being built along this road, right? So that the settlements that we saw a second ago will be able to be filled in, and all that land will be available for Jewish settlement. I was actually here when these homes were demolished, and I don't have any photographs of it because I was working building a house when I was told that there was a home demolition in progress. And so I came with a Reuters reporter and a German woman who was making a documentary, and we were in Bethlehem, and I didn't know where we were going in Bethlehem, but we walked out this little road right here, and I thought, oh my God, there's Hope Flower School, and there are those homes that I saw from the roof there. And there were a couple of Palestinians here on the road, and there were a couple of Israeli soldiers sort of lined up there so that nobody could pass. And there were more soldiers back behind here, and big demolition equipment. They have these big things, I don't know what to call them, they're like scorpions kind of, like a big jackhammer thing. And a bulldozer, Caterpillar bulldozer made in the United States, of course. And eventually I heard this rumbling noise behind me, and a whole stream of people from Bethlehem came out to protest what was happening there. The families were all by their homes, old women wailing, children looking on, these sorts of things. And of course, as they started to demolish the homes, it got pretty confrontational here on the road. Reinforcements were called up, Jeeps came, Hummers came, more soldiers pouring out, so that there were soldiers just shoulder to shoulder and 2 deep, or in places 3 deep, across the road. And people from Bethlehem sort of swelling up against them, and me sort of standing in the middle. And I was quite upset. I yelled at the soldiers. I said, what is this? What are you doing? Is this tikkun olam, like heal the world? Is this justice, tzedakah? What is going on here? What is being accomplished? And this one soldier who was standing sort of right in front of me had these like outfielder like baseball sunglasses on, they're like green and yellow and whatever. And I wasn't paying much attention to him, and I heard him say, what we're doing is important. And I was like, important for who? These people are homeless. And he said, no, what you're doing is important, he said to me. And it was very strange. Very strange. So yeah, this is the wall in Bethlehem, in a different part of Bethlehem, but which is now being extended to pass by Hope Flowers School. That's a sniper tower right there. That is not actually personed. There are no people in it. It's all electronic surveillance, or so I'm told. But of course, it's like a panopticon thing, right? Like, you never know if you're being watched from it. It could theoretically be watching you through your bedroom window a mile away, or while you're walking there, you don't really know. And that's me. So if you're wondering about the wall, like, that's how thick a lot of the wall is. Super thick, and there's some Banksy. Ariel Sharon, when the wall was being constructed, said, oh, it's a temporary fixture so that we can protect Israeli civilians in the short term. That doesn't look very short term to me. A little bit of graffiti for you. Interesting. Not exactly Banksy, right? Here you have a lion, which might be associated with like Judah, Kingdom of Israel of ancient. And here you have a dove, right, associated with peace, wearing a keffiyeh, which is associated with Palestinians. The black keffiyeh is associated with Fatah, which Gabe talked about. And of course, here you have like bird of terror written on the dove. And you have hypocrisy written here. I think that's probably Hebrew for oil. And money is in English. Money. Shekel, I think that's just money. Oh yeah, thank you. My good friend. Stop the wall, it says. So we've already seen a map sort of like this, so we don't have to spend a lot of time on it. We'll come back and talk more about areas A, B, and C. The most important thing is to, again, just remember the red line and how invasive it is into what's internationally declared Palestinian territory. And also to notice, touched on this a little bit, the reason why there are 4 different zones after Oslo is that there's areas A, B, and C, which have to do with who administers it. All of it, by the way, is actually supposed to go to Palestinian control, ultimately. It's just how it's to be administered differs, right? But we'll get to the 4th type later, actually, it's a better map coming up. Oh yes, so in Abu Dis, which is a Palestinian town that I went to, I saw some pretty interesting graffiti there too, from Warsaw Ghetto to Abu Dis Ghetto. And this doesn't just compare like, oh, people were put in a ghetto here, and people were put into a ghetto here, and that's kind of the same. It's not only that, because after the Holocaust, a lot of the discourse surrounding the situation in Israel-Palestine, whether it's triumphant Zionist, we need a safe place, or whether it's don't talk bad about the Zionist enterprise, a lot of it refers back to the Holocaust and the need for the Jewish people to have a homeland. But people who get this association and people who want to wave this image around and send it to as many people as possible realize that you can't really, or one ought not to use past prior suffering in order to justify the infliction of suffering on another. It's a pretty basic idea, but not a lot of people are okay with that. The Anti-Defamation League, which was started after the Second World War in America, ostensibly seeks to protect people, minorities, but specifically targets people who are critical of Israeli policies and calls them anti-Semitic. As a Jew, I urge all of you non-Jews to please stand up to that, and please don't worry about that, because we are not policing ourselves very well. We need your help desperately. Here's another piece of the wall in Abu Dis. As you can see, and a lot of places where I saw the wall, it's like not really functional. Like, you can't drive a car through that opening, but like this woman, I don't know if that's grandma or mama or auntie or whoever, or if it's a man in drag, could be, like took the whole family around that wall there, you see. So even though it was ostensibly for security purposes, a lot of the places on the wall were not secure. And I knew plenty of Israelis who would routinely go to the West Bank, which is illegal, but of course they know how to get there. And if Israelis can go to the West Bank without being caught, and I guess Palestinians can go to Israel without being caught, and so basically the conclusion that I draw from various things, including this, is that the wall is being built to cement certain demographic realities so that people will be forced to live in certain places and not in others, so that land can be acquired by the Israeli state. And this is a perfect case in point, right? This is still Abu Dis. This is an extension of the wall that you just saw, that little fragment of wall. Here you have a wall dividing Palestinians from Palestinians. Okay? I mean, to me that's a trip. But what it is it's trying to set up infrastructure to distinguish facts on the ground in the future. This is also the wall. You hear people talk about the wall, the fence, the barrier. There are different ways that people refer to it. Not all of it is super thick concrete like we just saw. Some of it is like ridiculous barbed wire. Electrified sometimes, motion sensors, automatic firing I've heard of, I don't know. But here you have a sign in Hebrew, in Arabic, and in English. Mortal danger, military zone. I can't read that. Any person who nears or damages the fence endangers his life. I like that masculine. And Palestinians here, right, are not like on a joyride. They're going from place to place. Closed military zones are what carve up the West Bank and make it impossible, like Gabe was saying, for Palestinians to move from place to place. This is an Israeli-only road. It might be a military-only road, but there are also Israeli-only roads that Palestinians can't go on, and they have to cross them sometimes in very precarious situations. And like Gabe was saying, at a whim, a soldier can just say, sorry, not today, get lost. Doesn't matter if you're going to school, doesn't matter if you're going to work, doesn't matter if you're going to the hospital. They basically have discretion all the time, and often use it to the detriment of the people who are, the Palestinians. So the question then becomes, which side of the wall are you on, and what is it like on this side versus that side, right? We just saw that Israel patrols the walls, controls the points of access through the wall, but they also do a lot more with the wall. They harvest resource from the Palestinian side of the wall. So you'll often hear of Palestinians whose farmlands are cut off by the wall, but you'll also hear about Palestinians whose farmlands are destroyed, just ripped up. This is a practice that used to be more common, although I'm not sure when the last time it happened was, but where olive trees are dug up, and these are hundreds of years old, right? People have been getting olives from these trees for I don't know how long. But they're dug up, and they're not just thrown away, that would be wasteful, right? They're transplanted in settlements like this one, which are of course for Israelis only and not for Palestinians. You can see what they do is they lift up the, I don't even know what you call it, the scooper, or whatever, on the bulldozer, and they just, push the tree over. So you have scars on the trees that are then scooped up and moved and replanted. Sometimes they're not replanted, sometimes they're harvested for their wood to make things with, or whatever it is. But yeah, this is in Mali Adumim, which is a seriously illegal settlement right outside of Jerusalem. And that lovely tree adorns the entryway to the settlement, for Israelis only, obviously. And here, more like Mali Adumim, you have a wondrous pool in the desert. My, how it has bloomed since Israel has existed. And beyond it, you have a place called Anata and a place called Shuafat Refugee Camp, where people have problems getting basic goods and services, even access to running water, even though they pay Jerusalem municipal taxes, right? But they're Palestinians, so we get a pool in the settlement, and we get shoddy to no services, questionable services in the Palestinian areas. Which side of the wall are you on? It's an important question for that. Now we're going to get into some numbers and stuff, and okay. So Gabe already talked a little bit about this, but this is just sort of a breakdown. We don't need to get into it too heavily. He already said the number. Around 500,000 Palestinians' lives are affected by the building of the wall. And this is where we get to start talking about home demolitions. We already did a little bit, but the Israeli Committee Against House Demolitions Let's see. Okay, so yeah, around 27,000 Palestinian structures have been destroyed in the occupied Palestinian territory since 1967. What they mean by this, and why it's important to note the nuance here, is that it's not just homes that they say have been demolished in occupied Palestine, it's structures, okay? The permit system, and to make way for the wall, basically does not discriminate between whether the structure in the way is a home, or whether it's a barn, or whether it's a well, or whether it's a greenhouse, or a tent. Which there have been reports from like the UN where they'll give people tents after their homes have been demolished, and then the IDF will come and demolish the tent or take it away. But here's a breakdown of the different types of home demolition. It's a little bit pixelated, sorry. But here you have military home demolition, which occurs when like bombs get dropped, or if the IDF thinks that they need space to safely caravan, they'll just demolish whole neighborhoods. So about 47% of the structure demolitions have been in the military. Then you have the nebulous undefined, like who knows. Then you have administrative, which I was talking about the permit system, and punitive, which is a practice that's not so much carried on anymore. We'll get to that in a second. Okay, now we're going to get to areas A, B, and C. Okay? Gabe already said areas A is for Palestinian control. Areas A are for, full Palestinian control. Areas B are for joint control, Palestinian Authority controlling the civil administration of it, Israel controlling the security of it, and Area C is for full Israeli control. Okay? Area C is all the white that you see. And the wall, the projected trajectory of the wall, actually goes inside here. So that what you'll have is you won't have any access to most of the water resources that are concentrated in the nation, or in the land, which are basically right in here. You won't have access to the sea, you won't have to the river or to the sea. And so Area C is, as it says here, 60% of the West Bank. And that is also the area where it's required that Palestinians have a permit in order to build. So in 60% of the West Bank, okay, which is a small portion of the state of Israel, remember, Palestinians need to have a permit in order to have a structure on their own land, even if the structure's been there since the Ottoman Empire's rule. Okay. Punitive home demolitions. This practice is against international law. It was stopped by Israel in 1997, but then resumed in October of 2001 when Israel once again began to demolish homes as a means of punishment in the occupied territories. By punishment, we mean that if gunfire is coming from a town, the IDF might demolish a number of homes in that town to say, we'll show you not to fire at us, or we'll show you not to allow others to fire at us. Sometimes it's the family member of somebody who has committed a crime, their home will be demolished. Sometimes it's somebody who's just been accused of a crime, their home will be demolished. Sometimes homes are demolished in order to apprehend suspects, who of course have not been proven guilty of anything. And between October of 2001 and the end of January of 2005, Israel demolished 664 houses as punishment. It's a lot of houses. Also keep in mind that Palestinians in the land generally, as their family grows and gets older and the younger children start to have babies, they build the house up often. They're family-oriented people, sociologically speaking. And so one home can house 4 generations. So when we say 664 houses, we're not just talking about 6-bedroom houses for 3 people. It's a lot of people often can be in a house, and we'll get more to the numbers here. And lo and behold, on February 17th of 2005, the Minister of Defense said there would be more punitive home demolitions. So these are some numbers of punitive home demolitions and the number of people that they made homeless in these given years. In 2004, 909 people were made homeless. In 2003, 1,805. Y'all are smart, you can read. We won't dwell. We'll try not to dwell on the numbers because they're abstract. Okay, military need house demolitions. Military need supersedes the Israeli Supreme Court's jurisdiction. So even if the Supreme Court declares it unconstitutional or unlawful for certain homes to be demolished or for certain areas to be adjudicated to particular uses, the military doesn't need to heed the Supreme Court's decision. There have been a number of Supreme Court decisions that have said, Israel, halt what you're doing. And the Israeli military basically uses their trump card, says it's for defense purposes, we got to do it, and just goes on with it. Oh yeah, so in between 2004 and 2011, 33,301 Palestinians were made homeless by military need house demolitions. And that includes like Operation Cast Lead and those types of things. And when I say homeless, I don't mean that they all necessarily live on the street, but their homes were destroyed and so they need to find homes elsewhere, like a family or whatever. No restitution, by the way, is paid to any of these victims of home demolitions. Okay. So this is military home demolitions, right, in these different years. We don't need to belabor the numbers, but the human cost is striking. Now, administrative house demolitions, this is what's so striking because it's not like the military is just superseding civil law. I mean, this is by the books, homes are being demolished. So since Oslo in '93, Palestinians living in Area C, as I said, must obtain a permit for any structure on their land. In Area C, more than 94% of building permit applications submitted by Palestinians to the Israeli Authority, at least by the numbers between 2000 and 2007, were rejected. So what you have is what I've been told is a Kafkaesque situation where there's a little like window at your local municipality that you can go to and like fill out some paperwork and hand in your form and hope upon hope, wish upon wish that you get a permit for the structure where your family lives and spends their daily life. But 94% of building permit applicants rejected it. Okay. So this is administrative home demolition numbers. Yeah, this is really interesting. I always have to remind myself of this because I always forget. Here you have the numbers, right? 626 people were left homeless in 2011, really only up to October, so like half the year. 309 of whom are minors. Okay, the double star there. In East Jerusalem, 14 of the homes that were demolished by their owners after receiving a demolition order. So they got the order and they destroyed their own house. Why? To avoid being charged by the municipality for the costs that is accrued by the government for executing the demolition order. Pretty wild. So like not only is all your stuff under the rubble now, you're without a home, but yeah, by the way, here's your bill. Real smooth. I don't want to look at numbers anymore, I'm sorry. Okay. We won't get into that. Well, we can. So this is Beit Arabiya, the House of Arabiya. It's the base of operations for ICAD, the Israeli Committee Against House Demolitions. People come there, they live there, they learn there, they rebuild Palestinian homes that were demolished together. I did that. That's where, when I took most of these pictures, all these pictures. That area across the hill there is Area C. Okay, so you need a permit in order to have a structure on the land there. But more than that, it's set aside for collective use. Green space, they call it, okay? Which means, technically, that no structures are allowed on it. So the guy who owns this house, Beit Arabiya, Salim Shawambre, knows the guy that used to live over there, right? They're like pals, like, hey, good morning. And that guy was told one day that his home was going to be demolished, and of course he went about his daily life, and eventually they came and demolished it. And of course, and so he applied a number of times over and over again for a permit to have a structure on his land, when eventually the Jerusalem municipality, because this is in the Jerusalem municipality, came back with an answer that said, oh yeah, now it's green area, it's for agricultural use only, it's for collective park use only, no structures are allowed on this land, we're really sorry, gotta go. And eventually, they built an administrative detention center there. right? Where people are brought to be interrogated or whatever. Incidentally, the wall is being built in this valley in between. So you can't see the valley, and it's not being built yet, but now it is being built. This was in 2005, one of these pictures. Okay, so I decided one day to follow an awesome woman to this place because she said she had something to show me there. Her name is Sarah. She's pictured there holding that child. I don't know which of these kids, but about half of these kids belong to the family that owns this house, and half of them belong to another family who's related to that family. Okay? That is the home that the other half of the kids used to live in. Everybody follow me what I'm saying? Okay. Yeah, so you can see in the near distance, right? Whenever you see those red clay roofs like that, that's settlement stuff. And it disgusts me because here you have a road down below, beyond this one here, that is a totally arbitrary barrier that sets in concrete another arbitrary barrier between Israeli and Palestinian. And across that line, you do not have the right to live in a home, apparently. And a number of times not given that right. Whereas here, people will be subsidized to go there, you'll be given everything you needed, everything will work out, you have the whole of the state of Israel behind you. You have the whole of the United States behind you. The family that lived in this house, which is now a tent, sort of, their home had been, this is the third or fourth time that their home had been demolished. I don't remember what. And it's so funny because, I've heard people say, oh, well, why don't they just move? It's going to get demolished. Why do they rebuild it? Well, if you own a piece of land and you don't own any other pieces of land, and you don't really have any other place to go and build for yourself, and you don't really have the money to pay rent versus buying some cheap concrete to, throw up 4 walls and a roof, then really what choice do you have? I don't know. A lot of people have to keep rebuilding. And I mean, Israel, even if it wanted to demolish all the homes that they've issued demolition orders for, it would probably take a really long time. The point is that all these homes have demolition orders placed upon them so that at any moment, the IDF could show up at 5 o'clock in the evening, at 5 o'clock in the morning, at noon, whenever they want, and say, 10 minutes, get out, we're demolishing your house. And that's what they do. That's how they do it. So anyway, I came with some people to this woman's home to talk to her, and that's her. I know that's me. That's her. She is an incredibly strong woman, I guess, but not strong enough to withstand the trauma of home demolition. And it's going to get sentimental real quick, and this is like real shit, so if you don't want to hear it, you don't have to, you can leave or something. But this woman, the second and third times that her home was demolished, well, the first time, the second time her home was demolished, she was pregnant and had a miscarriage, pretty much right after the demolition. And the third time her home was demolished, she was very pregnant and gave birth very soon after, and gave birth to a stillborn child. Her husband worked for the Israeli police. Yeah. Basically what I'm saying is that it doesn't matter what you do or who you are. If you're a Palestinian, it could just as easy happen to you as the next one. And they don't give a fuck about your kid. Okay? Now I talked to this woman, and basically, I wanted to tell her that on behalf of Jews, I was sorry. Like, what an asshole thing to say. Like, who am I, right? And she didn't understand what I was saying, and I had been, talking with her, and she was like, didn't get it. So this woman, Sarah, the one who I went with to this place, translated, you know, this guy's a Jew. And she looked astonished and said that she had never seen a Jew without a gun before in her life. Yeah. So there's that. Yeah. Oh, and that's one of her daughters who served us tea, like on her veranda under the tent, or whatever that part of the house was. Little daughter. Okay, so wrapping up, I think. The wall in Abu Dis again, right? Paid by USA. Paid by USA. Okay. And this is my favorite part of the presentation because up until now it's all like, ooh, look at what Israelis are doing. Ooh, look what Israelis are doing. Okay. But when we point a finger, we've got at least 3 pointing back at us. Okay. American money, Israeli apartheid. From the fiscal year 2000 to 2009, the United States appropriated Israel $24.099 billion in foreign military financing, the official budgetary term for military aid. With this taxpayer money, the United States licensed, paid for, and delivered more than 670,903,390 weapons and related equipment to Israel, valued at blah, blah, blah. During these same calendar years, Israel killed at least 2,969 Palestinians who took no part in hostilities through its illegal military occupation of the Palestinian West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Gaza Strip. 30 billion more in military aid has been pledged from the fiscal year 2010 to 2020. And yeah, these are some sources. Just one more thing that I would say, because it's a tendency, I think, in the discourse amongst people on the left and people in the middle to say, ooh, we have these like radical religious fundamentalists who are, you know, supporting this Israeli policy of settlement, and we have these radical, crazy right-wing Christians in America who are, you know, advocating it, and both of those statements are true. Like that does happen. But those people are such a small percentage. Most people are just regular, everyday people like you and I, who pay their taxes, who go to work, who participate in a functioning society, and in so doing, right, perpetuate the occupation of Palestine. Right? We do it, and Israelis do it. I mean, you saw all that stuff. You don't have the occupation unless you have roads paved that exclude Palestinians. You don't have the occupation unless you've got somebody driving the bulldozer, knocking down someone's house. You don't have the occupation unless all those people in the IDF stand by lockstep, you know, and stop you from getting in front of the bulldozers. Even the guy that said what you're doing is important, right? That guy's not a religious fundamentalist. Most Israelis are not religious fundamentalists. Most Americans are not religious fundamentalists. Okay? This is basic, middle of the road, basically liberal politics that has enabled all this. Okay? It's not them that we need to worry about. It's like us people and people who are just regular people. And that's it.